If you want to change your habits or build new ones, if you want to start a business, or if you want to stop drinking, if you want a better relationship with your parents or your kids or your partner, what is the common denominator in all of these desires? It's you. You don't solve problems that you didn't create. If it's someone else's fault, it's someone else's problem. So that means to solve any problem, you have to first own it, and only then can you solve it. Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, a board-licensed coach who has been working with people just like you to build better habits and routines for over a decade. Jocko Willink said, "Instead of letting the situation dictate our decisions, we must dictate the situation." You create the life you want to live, and that starts with a decision, and that decision leads to change. It's that simple. Now, let's make it easy. Today, I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation with Tracy Pleschourt. Tracy is a certified coach, an entrepreneur, and a founder, and she's also the host of the Tracy and Gracie Becoming podcast that she hosts along with her daughter, Gracie, and they provide life advice across multiple generations, which I think is just a really cool idea. Tracy created the SELF method that we discussed today, first as a tool for herself to allow her to stop overeating and overdrinking. And now she's created a multiple six-figure business while teaching others to do the same. In this episode, Tracy breaks down her SELF method. She explains what your Prodigy Brain is and how to tap into it. And she lays out simple guidelines for how you can start being the solution to the problems that you've helped create. That one was huge for me because, if I'm being honest, I am the creator of a lot of my problems and I get in my own way a lot. So I can't wait for you to learn all about it. Here's my conversation with Tracy Pleschourt. What does it mean to be self-made?
Ooh, I love that question. So I know a lot of people, when they hear that term, they immediately go to kind of an ego-driven type definition. And I think of it more as a purpose-driven definition where you are taking responsibility for all of your results in life, whether they're unintentional or intentional. And you are modeling that kind of behavior, that way of being for other people. You're almost inspiring other people to take that sort of responsibility. That, as a result of more people behaving in that way, there's a lot less blame. There's a lot less finger pointing going on. So that's what I think of. It's almost like a self-actualization. If you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that tippy top is self-actualization, and it's really purpose-driven. A lot of people would define it as impacting other people's lives. And I believe that to be true. I think for me personally, in order to hit that level and to feel like I am self-actualized or I'm self-made, I had to work through a lot of my own stuff first. I had to solve my own problems before I could go out and really impact other people's lives. And I'm not ashamed of saying that. I'm actually proud to say that I continually work through my own problems, and I take credit and I take responsibility for all of the results in my life. And that feels really good. That allows me to stay in a place of control. So I hope that sort of gives you an idea of what it means to be self-made, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have a list of, really big accomplishments and achievements. I have some, but that's not why I consider myself self-made. I consider myself self-made because I'm willing to feel all the feels, including fear and humiliation and disappointment alongside of joy and satisfaction that I know that those unwanted feelings really allow me to even have the experience of the wanted feelings. And so it's really a state of being.
Yeah, so I want to come back to that, the second piece there where you said like the stuff that you allow myself to feel all the feelings, which is the opposite of the stuff that we tend to avoid, the fear, the anger, the sadness, and things like that. I think that that's important. I do want to come back to that, but it's interesting that you started with self-made and then self-actualization, right, the top of the hierarchy, and yet the first thing you said was about doing for others. So it's interesting to me that you're talking about the self, but about inspiring and about doing all of these other things that are outside of ourselves. I'm interested in if you could expand a little bit more on how you see those two interplaying with each other.
Yeah. So it is a way of being that I think can capture the interest of other people because it often, the energy feels a lot different when you're around somebody that takes that kind of responsibility, that is willing to feel all the feels. And so you are almost indirectly modeling a behavior, a way of being. And sometimes you can do it directly. Sometimes I can be very explicit. It kind of depends on my audience. If my audience consists of my children, I'll be very explicit and tell them this is why I think, feel, and behave this way. And hopefully they, learn and apply it themselves. So that's my deep desire. But often I have just people that are kind of in my circle that will comment, or they'll just ask me like, how do you think like that? Why do you think like that? How do you have the kind of courage you have? And I don't necessarily think of it as being a very, a super courageous person. I think of it as a way of operating. And I also think of myself as kind of a slow learner. I think of myself as a lifelong learner, but kind of a slow learner. I have to use a lot of frameworks and to be able to recall things. So I created a framework from which I operate from, and now it's just part of who I am. But the framework is using the acronym SELF, SELF, and it literally is a way of operating, a way of thinking, a way of showing up. And it creates a embodiment or a feeling of self-control and self-confidence.
Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds, but right now I have to ask you for a huge favor. If you're getting value out of this episode so far, take 2 seconds and share it with a friend. I mean, right now, literally, hit the little share button and send it in a text to your roommate or your cousin or your mom or your brother or your sister. Seriously, spread the love. If you like what you're hearing, then that's the best way that you can show support for this show. Because maybe you're like Eliza Kay, who said, "This podcast is both warm and inviting, but real enough to push and motivate me." Or you're like Dalton, who said, "Paul is an amazing host, and his podcast is a must listen." Don't you want to share this awesomeness with your friends and family? Don't be a gatekeeper. It only takes a second. It helps me grow and reach a new audience, and you seem like a genius friend who recommends new, awesome podcasts. We all win. All right, go send that text. And now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that we're very alike in a lot of ways, because I'm the same way, right? People ask me all the same stuff. Oh, that's so cool that you do this, or like, wow, how do you think about it like that? It's like, I don't know. I'm just regular. Like, that's just, my brain works in some ways. It's very, very easy for me to do stuff like that. And that's why I have this podcast, and that's why I have courses, and that's why I teach this stuff, because for some people it just clicks easier than for others. And for people like you or like me, who that is, it's like, then you feel the need to share it with other people, because it's like, this is easy for me, but hard for you. So I want to make it easy for you as well. And in the same way, I operate off of frameworks and acronyms. I've tons of acronyms. People listen to this show will know I'm always giving out checklists and acronyms and things like that. I would love for you to go into your self model and kind of break that down and explain that for me and for listeners as well. I'm sure it could be very helpful.
Yeah. So I like to think of Self-Made You, the company that I own, as really a place. It fills the gap that I think formal education tends to leave. I have two recent graduates of college living back at home now, and they both have great, they're just starting their great careers, but they admittedly left college, graduating from college with a degree, not knowing how to think in a way that achieves goals, that has them connecting with like their future self, with being able to rely on themselves as the solution to overcoming problems. They left college thinking that everything, all the answers existed outside of them, and that they had to like find the guru, find the answer, invest in something else in order to get what it is that they want. And that's like almost the exact opposite of what I teach here at Self-Made You. I teach people how to rely on themselves, to think of themselves, SELF, as the solution to their problems, so that they don't have to rely on things outside of themselves. I know personally, I used to think of myself as the common denominator to all my problems. I was an overdrinker. I was an overeater. I was an overspender. I was an under-earner. I'm like, boy, I just seem to be the common denominator of all of my problems. It never occurred to me that I myself could have been the solution. I was so busy trying to figure out what was actually to blame. I was so busy trying to find that silver bullet, that next trend, that thing that I was missing, that it never occurred to me that I could utilize myself. So what self stands for is, it's a method, it's a system. So you start with a decision. Now, I want you to apply this to whatever the flavor of the day, whatever the flavor of the problem is today, because literally this can be applied in unlimited ways. So you start with the decision. What is it that you want? Why do you want it? I know that sounds so cliche, so basic, but I promise you, 99% of the people don't ask themselves that question. And if they do ask themselves that question, they don't answer the question. So it's important that you ask yourself, what is it that I want? And context it. What is it that I want from my health? What is it that I want from my relationship with my partner? What is it that I want from my work day? What is it that I want from today? Like, ask yourself that, and then ask yourself, why? Why is that important to me? Okay, so you start with a decision. Secondly, you eliminate the self-sabotage. Now, we all have this 3-pound organ that exists between our ears, and if you were to cut it right down the middle, the left half is your primitive brain. Its purpose is to keep you alive. And it does that in a very dramatic sort of way. It's offering you all these fear-based thoughts to keep you safe. Well, the reality is we're not in a lot of danger, and we tend to listen and believe these self-sabotaging narratives. And so it's okay that they're there. Like I said, your primitive brain does have a purpose. But what I teach my clients to do is to notice those narratives and not react from them. I teach them to notice them and respond. two totally different results, like two totally different ways of operating. Knee-jerk reactions often don't end well, right? Especially when we're hearing these fear-based thoughts, like you should have done it differently. They shouldn't have been late for the lunch appointment. They don't love you anymore. They don't value you, right? Like all of these fear-based thoughts that sabotage us. And then you react from that thought, and it's not even a true thought. It's highly dramatic and often untrue. So when you respond by questioning the validity of that thought, you eliminate the self-sabotage. Okay? So start with the decision, eliminate the self-sabotage, leverage your prodigy brain strengths. So the other half of your brain is called your prodigy brain. Doctors would say your prefrontal cortex, but I call it your prodigy brain because it's the more extraordinary part of your brain. It's the part of your brain that allows you to respond. It allows you to question your own thinking. When you're operating from your prodigy brain, which when you have a heightened sense of awareness, by default, you are actually there. So I want you to maximize the fact that you're there. And I want you to tap into the strengths that are only afforded to you through your prodigy brain. So when you're in your primitive brain and you're spinning out in fear, or you're stunted because of the dramatic narratives you're listening to, you have no access to strengths like curiosity or empathy or discovery or innovation. But when you're in your prodigy brain, through having a heightened sense of awareness, through responding, through questioning, now you can really like 10x the value of being there by leveraging those strengths that are afforded to you. So you can have empathy for your humanity. You can, stop the judgment and be like, oh yeah, that's right. That's just my primitive brain doing what it does best. When I walk through the kitchen and I see a plate of cookies and my primitive brain says, you better eat those before somebody else does, I can respond with, is that even true? And is that even a problem? Cookies are widely available. It's not a problem. I don't have to eat them all. But if I didn't question it, they'd be as good as gone. So you can question it when you're operating from your prodigy brain. You can get innovative. You can get curious. You can have empathy for yourself and for others. So you want to tap into those strengths. And there's 5 of them that you can tap into, leverage when you are using this methodology, but you have to go in this order. So you start with a decision, eliminate the self-sabotage, leverage your prodigy brain strengths, and finally you finish with a decision. So all this is you take the next step that is so easy, it's almost hard not to do. So again, when you're going in this order and you're now in your prodigy brain and you are innovating and you have empathy and you're not self-loathing and you're not spinning out in fear, the next step that's so easy, it's almost hard not to do, becomes very clear. And when you start thinking of this as a flywheel, literally every single step you take, no matter under what context, these compounded, very simple steps that you're taking with intention creates great progress. And it starts wonderful momentum. So this is how you rely on yourself to solve any problem, to achieve any goal. All you have to remember is that you can trust yourself. You can utilize yourself. You are not the problem. You are actually the solution. And so having that in your back pocket can be really helpful and very life-changing.
So, love all of that. I mean, very, very, very similar to a lot of the way I teach it, even the way you explain it. It's very, very intuitive, and I love that. But to play devil's advocate, right? You just said the power of momentum and the flywheel, right? I talk about this a lot too. It's very hard to get going, but once you get it going, it's very hard to stop. But then what about the people who the flywheel is working against them? The people who have the momentum, but it's negative momentum, and they feel like they're stuck because they've been stuck, and the stuckness is keeping them more stuck.
Yeah. So what's happening in that situation is that their focus is on the wrong thing. So I like to explain it. I have a whole jar of these pens with a fluffy side and the pointy side. And so every topic, no matter what you're talking about, is essentially two topics. It's like what it is that you want and the absence of it. And so which side are you going to focus on? Your primitive brain is going to have you focusing on the absence of what you want. And that is painful. When you sit and focus on this side, the absence of the topic, and you just keep poking yourself, that's really painful. And that is what's causing that momentum. The pain just keeps compounding, and that's what we call unnecessary suffering. But you can shift your focus to the other side of it. In what ways is what you want already available to you? It's so fascinating how I have people coming into our program wanting to lose weight, and I ask them, why do you want to lose weight? I want to be happy. Okay, so let's just talk about what in your life brings you joy right now. And they can talk for days about their family, and they can talk for days about the weather, and they can, all the things. But what are they choosing to focus on? The painful part, the absence of this other thing. And when they're focused on that creates pain, and it keeps them operating from their primitive brain. So I know your next question is going to be, okay, great, but how? How do you get them out of that? Okay, well, that primitive brain, all that is mind chatter. And it does, like you said, it does start momentum. And sometimes that momentum can be like a car going down a San Francisco hill that you're standing at the bottom of. And it's like, oh God, I better get out of the way. So the way to do that is a mental fitness technique. Any of them, but pick one. So I like box breathing. I like meditation. I like listening techniques. So take 2 minutes and really invest in a mental fitness technique. I personally like the ones where I don't have to excuse myself and go into another room and close my eyes. Like sometimes I have to do a mental fitness technique while I'm on a podcast. Like my brain will start spinning out on me and I feel the fear, and it's like, okay, I need to shut down that primitive brain chatter. And so I can do a technique that is just where I laser focus on the host and really like look at fine details. So all I'm doing is I'm shifting my focus from those fear-based thoughts to a different sensation, right? I'll also do a lot of listening techniques. Now, I love meditation, but there's a time and a place. And so box breathing is another great one. Sometimes just, the sensations of your pointer finger to your thumb and just applying enough pressure between the two that you can feel the ridges. You really want to focus on, can I feel the ridges? Like, can I feel those fingerprints? That's another great mental fitness technique. Now, what that's doing essentially is turning down the volume of that primitive brain chatter. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to slow the momentum. And that is going to help you. That intention that you are applying now has you, by default, you are operating from your prodigy brain, from your prefrontal cortex, because you're doing something with intention. Okay, now you can start to leverage those strengths that are available to you. So that's a little hack.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and very accessible and doable. The rubbing the fingers together technique. I was just doing it as you were talking, and it shifts your focus. box breathing, for anyone who doesn't know listening, is, you know, a type of breathing technique where you're inhaling for a certain amount of time, holding your breath for a certain amount of time, exhaling for the same amount of time, holding your breath out for the same amount of time. So it's like 3 seconds in, hold for 3 seconds, 3 seconds out, hold for 3 seconds, or whatever. And it's been
Exactly.
shown to really be calming and help, especially if you're having a, you know, panic, anxiety, that type of thing. So I'm appreciative of you sharing those techniques with the audience, because I always love very actionable things to do. And it's
Mhm.
clear that you have a wealth of knowledge, and, you know, you have your own courses and all the things that you're doing. But one of the things that you do that I'm interested in is, I know you have a podcast with your daughter, your
Mhm.
daughter Gracie. And I'd like to know, because I know that the concept of your podcast is like two different perspectives from two different generations. So I'm curious if there's anything that you've learned from your daughter through the course of your podcast that's changed the way that you've looked at things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, a lot. I way more than I'm sure she's learned from me. But yeah, she is 23 years old, graduated from college just this past May, and is now a co-owner of Self-Made You. Went through our certification program, so now she too is a certified coach, and has she has a younger perspective. I would say a less jaded perspective. When I talk about marketing and I start grunting and moaning, and she's like, Mom, marketing's not hard. And I'm like, what do you mean marketing's not hard? Marketing's so hard. But, you know, I get so caught up in primitive brain, fear-based thinking, where your primitive brain wants to be right. It wants to then go to work and find all of the evidence. It looks to the past and points out all of the evidence so that it can be right. And she comes with this very light perspective of, so what? That didn't work. There's a million other things we can try. And, you know, what didn't work today is actually going to fuel the next effort. And now we know that that doesn't work. And we are actually, you know, it's a gift and an opportunity that that didn't work. And, you know, so she brings the right perspective at the right time for me. And I am so grateful that my business was the size that it was this past spring, that I could easily fold her into the mix. I wasn't too big, I wasn't too small. It was just the perfect time to be able to bring her on board, afford her the time to get certified as a coach, to really find how much she loves impacting other people's lives. And it's been really fun to kind of flex that creative muscle alongside of her, and to really talk about different perspectives, generational perspectives on everything from life to love to the legacy of what this business, you know, affords us. And it's, yeah, I can honestly say there isn't a day that goes by that I don't learn from her. Um and I just marvel at what the business under her watchful eye will look like someday. Right now, it has a strong influence of Tracy, and I think how fun it's going to be to see when it has, you know, the strong influence of Gracie.
I mean, that's amazing. I'm the dream, I would assume. I'm not a parent, but I would think that for every parent, that would be the coolest thing ever, to be able to bring your daughter into what you're doing and be so aligned in so many ways. And, you know, whether it's mother daughter, there's something to be said of that, the generational divide, you know, Gen X, Gen Z, millennial, whatever. I don't even know what things people fall into these days anymore. But there's a difference, right? When we talk, you know, I'm 34, 30, I'll be 34 next week. And you know, like, people in their 20s versus people in their 50s, you know, that we think about things differently because of, you know, technology and the way that we're raised. So you mentioned that Gracie has a little bit different perspective, and kind of can be more positive in some aspects. I'm curious if you've seen anything with the younger generations of, you know, either who you work with or your daughter or anything like that, something of on the negative side of the way that they're looking at things coming up that you see as wrong. Just like how when you're looking at the marketing is kind of negative, and Gracie looks at it and he goes, no, like you're not seeing this. This is a potential for growth. Have you seen the shoe be on the other foot in any regards?
I have. Yeah. I think that I see the people pleaser, her need to really win people over. I see that come out quite a bit, and that can be those narratives that she listens to, that will they like this? Will they like me? That need to almost be affirmed. I see that a lot. And I know that when you're reacting to those kind of narratives, that, you know, doesn't often end well. And so that's an area that, like she'll point out my hyperachiever narratives where I attach my worth to my accomplishments. And I can easily point out her people pleasing tendencies. And I think I see that because I have clients her age, and I see that come up quite a bit in that age group.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me when you say it like that, right? Like that generation, the 20s, the Gen Zs, the Gen X, whatever the hell it is, the kids who were raised on TikTok and
Yeah.
Instagram and likes,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, like that's what matters to me, social validation.
Yeah.
Whereas, me, my sister, my parents, before that, it was about accomplishment. It was about
Mm-hmm.
climbing up the corporate ladder. Kids, they don't even care about that. They don't care about promotions. They don't care about that, but they do care about how many followers they have. So it makes perfect sense. And it's like, we don't like to put people into buckets, and you can't be so matter of fact about it, but we can start to see in broad strokes that communication across generations like that will matter, because if you try to appeal to someone who's your daughter's age the way that you would want to be appealed to, it doesn't, it might not work out. And the same goes in the opposite way, except that if you go a layer deeper and you realize that all of this just comes down to what you were talking about in the beginning, which is safety. Because to you, achievement is safety, money is safety, right? And that's why things like marketing are like so complicated. But to your daughter, it's just like feelings or safety, right? Feeling love, feeling embraced, feeling whatever. So it's just it's an interesting thing to see, and that's one of the cool things about coaching, is that you get to work with so many people, you get to see it play out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think that, I think for people listening to this, one of the main things that's like, that's why it's so important to listen to podcasts like this and have conversations like this, because if you're just on your own, you only see things through your perspective. When you see
Yeah.
things only through your perspective, it can be very easy to go into those narratives of like, oh, I'm broken, or things are wrong, or I'm less than. But when you have conversations like this and you realize, oh, this isn't just a me thing, this is
Mm-hmm.
a human thing, because all of this stuff is human stuff. So what are some of the ways where you've seen working on yourself has been most helpful to those around you?
Whew. Well, when I launched Self-Made You, I launched with a weight loss program. Even though I offered general life coaching, I decided that I would offer one program to solve one big problem. I knew that I was absolutely being called to impact other people's lives, but quite honestly, I had my own shit that I had to like figure out in order to get there. And so I had to really meet my own needs first in order to get to this point where I could be effective in impacting other people's lives. And so I was like, okay, well, here is how I'm going to go about losing weight. And I didn't want to use any sort of silver bullet. I really wanted long lasting weight loss. And so I knew that if I took a mental and metabolic approach to it, it was going to be the 1-2 punch. Anytime you can solve for a root cause, you are way more likely to have sustainable change. What most weight loss programs do is they give you the actions but they don't solve for the root cause, which is always emotions and the way that you're thinking that cause those emotions. So we bring the 1-2 punch. We help people better understand the metabolic science of their body and the mental science. So that was the program that really put us on the map, and it kind of opened up the floodgates. And then what happened was that we took the same framework, the same self framework, and I believe that one of the best ways to learn is applied learning. But once you've learned it in an applied environment, now go out and apply it in another environment. And now you really have taken your learning to a deeper level. And so then I was like, all right, well, what other problems do I have to publicly solve? And so it looked like, professional advancement or entrepreneurship, or sadly at the time I was really struggling with over drinking. And so I conquered that, and I did it through applying, thinking of myself as the solution, using that self framework. And again, when you can solve problems at the root level, where it's the way you're thinking and feeling, it's not about what you're doing. The thinking and feeling is what's leading to the doing. And anybody can white knuckle their way through not drinking for a period of time. But if you want to solve something sustainably, you got to go to the root cause. So how did I influence and impact other people? I'll just be really honest in saying it was putting all my shit out there for people to see and kind of come along for the ride. And you have to understand the framework before you get to raise your hand and say, I want to formally learn how to impact other people's lives. You got to clean up your own stuff first. And that's the applied learning that I afford people, because I know that works.
And my last question for you, Tracy, is the same question that I ask every guest on here. It's for listeners. If you can give all the listeners here today a simple action step that they can use as soon as they take their headphones out, as soon as this episode ends, to start living a happier, healthier life, what would it be?
I'm so glad you asked me that. Okay, so no matter what time it is right now in the world that you're listening to this podcast, I want you to ask yourself, how do I want to be feeling in the next 10 minutes? I want you to make a decision ahead of time. Now, this is so foreign, so simple, yet so foreign to so many people. Make a decision ahead of time, not about where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing. I want you to make a decision ahead of time about how you want to be feeling. Okay? So this is so counterintuitive. Like, I have a day planner that you can buy on Amazon, and the emphasis is not on where you're going to be or what you're going to be doing, like most day planners. It, of course, has a space for that, but the emphasis is on how do you want to be feeling. So your listeners, the actionable takeaway is make a decision about how it is that you want to be feeling in the next 10 minutes, in the next hour, at your next slotted, commitment. Maybe it's tonight as you're making dinner. Decide right now how you want to be feeling. Do not leave it to spontaneity. Decide, how do you want to be feeling? And then the next question is, what would I have to be believing in order to feel that way? Okay, because this is not affirmations. This is not affirmations. This is, you get to decide how you want to be feeling, and you also come up with the believable train of thought that generates that feeling. So it's 2 decisions that you're making ahead of time. That's what changes lives in a compounded, incremental way.
While it might sting to hear a little at first, I think the notion of being completely at fault for all of our own issues and problems is freeing. Because if I cause a problem, that means I can also solve it. And that means if all of my problems are self-made, so are my solutions. I love how Tracy laid out her SELF method. S, stand for a decision. E, eliminate self-sabotage. L, leverage your Prodigy Brain. And F, finish with decision. Such a powerful tool. I hope that you put it into action today. Make sure you connect with Tracy at self-madeyou.com and check out the podcast that she does with her daughter Gracie called Tracy and Gracie Becoming. I've linked to all of that, plus Tracy's social media in the show notes, so go check out what she's going on and learn to be self-made, because that is change made easy. Before you go, I just have to ask you for a huge favor. If you enjoyed or got value from this episode at all, then take a moment and leave a rating and review in the podcast app that you're listening or watching on. If you like the show and you want me to continue to create more episodes and be able to get awesome guests that will help make changing your life easier, then this is the best way you can show support. You can leave a 5-star review on iTunes like Eliza K, who said, "This podcast is both warm and inviting, but real enough to push and motivate me." Thank you, Eliza. Or you can be like Dalton, who said, "Paul is an amazing host and his podcast is a must listen." Thank you, Dalton. And thank you to all of the over 100 people who have taken the time to rate and review this show 5 stars on iTunes, or the dozens who have left 5-star reviews on Spotify. It only takes a minute, and it helps me grow, it helps me reach a new audience, and it lets me know that this is helping someone, which just feels good. All you have to do is go to the show page of whatever app you're listening to and hit the little 5 stars. Or go to the comments section on YouTube and boom, that's it. And if you really want to show love, take a screenshot when you do it and tag me in your stories on social media at Change Made Easy, and I'll shout you out in an upcoming episode. All right, go leave that rating, and I'll see you back here every Tuesday and Thursday with new episodes of Change Made Easy.